Okay, so Rome, right. I mean, it's like when you say Rome, it just screams power. Like, for centuries, they were the empire. But then, boom, it's gone. What happened?
That's a big question, and it's kind of what we're digging into today,
So
right?
we're doing this deep dive into why the Western Roman Empire fell apart. We've
Yeah.
got this awesome transcript from the Life Guide video. Really gets you thinking.
Yeah, and it's not just about like the barbarian invasions, which everyone always talks
I
about.
mean, it's like there's got to be more to it.
Way more. I mean, think about it. At its peak, we're talking 117 AD under Trajan. This empire was massive, almost 2 million square miles.
Huge. And they had the biggest, baddest, most professional army anywhere.
Exactly. But then fast forward to 476 AD, and Romulus Augustus, the last Western emperor, gets the boot thanks to this guy, Odoacer.
It's wild, though, because the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, they kept chugging along for another 1,000 years.
Right. So what was different in the West? What made it so vulnerable?
That's the puzzle.
One thing to keep in mind is that 476, while symbolic, is really the culmination of a super long decline. The pressure from those barbarian groups, as the Romans called them, was relentless.
Yeah, but the transcript makes a good point. These weren't just, like, random raids.
No, a lot of them were huge migrations of people looking for new land, sometimes pushed by even bigger forces further east.
Like a domino effect.
Exactly. And one big example is the Goths showing up in 376.
They weren't even trying to conquer at first, right? They were refugees.
Totally. Imagine being a refugee desperate for help, and the Romans are like,
The worst hosts ever.
seriously, famine, exploitation, people so desperate they were trading their own kids for food. That's messed up. It shows you how messed up things were already inside Rome.
Yeah, it's like they were crumbling from within while getting hammered from the outside.
Absolutely. And that mistreatment of the Goths, it led straight to the Gothic War.
And then, boom, Adrianople, 378 AD. A complete disaster for the Romans. Emperor Valens gone. A huge chunk of their army wiped out. Talk about a blow to their reputation.
It really was a game changer. And it forced the Romans to make a really radical move. Theodosius I decides to let the Goths settle within the empire. They could even join the army.
That's crazy. Never been done before.
Right. It was probably meant to be a practical thing, like, hey, we need troops. But you're also bringing in this massive foreign military force, which is, well, kind of risky.
And that's where Alaric comes in, right? The Visigothic
Oh,
king.
yeah, Alaric. This guy had actually fought in the Roman army, so he knew exactly what they were capable of. And after Theodosius died and the empire got split up, Alaric started getting really unhappy. He felt like the Visigoths were getting a raw deal.
So that agreement with Theodosius, it was always kind of shaky.
Total tinderbox. And then Alaric goes and lays siege to Rome. Not once, but multiple times. Talk about sending shockwaves through the empire.
The first siege, in 401, they managed to hold him off. But then Honorius, the emperor, makes this unbelievable decision. He executes Stilicho, the very general who had just saved Rome. Yeah. The transcript mentions this funny but kind of sad story. Honorius hears that Rome is, basically toast. And he's like, oh no, not my pet chicken Roma. Like, that was his biggest concern.
Wow. It shows how out of touch the leadership was. And Alaric, seeing this weakness, well, he sacks Rome in 410. Honorius wouldn't give him the land he wanted, so.
The eternal city falls to the barbarians.
It was a symbolic blow, more than just a military defeat. It really signaled the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire.
And after that, it's like everything starts unraveling, right? Like dominoes. The transcript goes into all these different groups carving up the empire,
You've got Constantine III rebelling in Britain and Gaul.
which leads to Britain being lost forever. The Romans wouldn't even help them at first.
Crazy. Then you've got Germanic tribes crossing the Rhine, the Suebi setting up shop in Hispania, and the Vandals, led by Gaiseric, taking over North Africa.
Including Carthage. And then they grabbed parts of Sicily and all these islands in the Mediterranean.
The Vandals were busy. The point is, these weren't just quick raids. These groups were settling down, building their own kingdoms. The map of the Western Roman world was being redrawn.
And the Visigoths. Weren't they initially given land by Honorius?
Yeah, in southern Gaul. They were supposed to fight off other barbarians in Hispania, but they eventually said, screw that, and took even more land.
So even that alliance was temporary.
Exactly. Even when they did team up, like against Attila the Hun, it was short-lived. As soon as the Hunnic threat was gone, everyone went back to fighting each other.
And the Western Empire just kept shrinking.
Losing territory means losing taxes, losing resources, losing power. It's a downward spiral.
Right.
By the time you get to 475, with Julius Nepos getting kicked out and Orestes putting his son, Romulus, on the throne.
Romulus, what a name, huh?
Right. But anyway, the empire is a shadow of its former self, and then the Federatis come knocking.
The Federati. Remind me who they are again.
So basically, the Federati were these barbarian groups. The Romans had given them land and some autonomy within the empire, and in return, they were supposed to provide troops. Well, now they're demanding land in Italy.
Makes sense. They're like, we're doing the dirty work. Where's our cut?
Exactly. And Orestes says no. Big mistake. The Federati turn to Odoacer, who proceeds to kick Orestes' butt, kill him, and then, bam, deposes poor little Romulus in 476.
End of an era.
Literally. Odoacer sends the imperial insignia back to Constantinople, basically saying, the Western Roman Empire is closed for business. But here's the thing. The transcript really drives this home. Those outside pressures, they were only part of the problem.
Yeah, it's like they were getting punched from the outside, but they were already weak on the inside.
Right, and one of the biggest internal weaknesses, ironically, was their size.
Wait, I thought being huge was a good thing.
It can be, but when you get too big, it's hard to manage. Remember, we're talking ancient times. Communication took forever. Try governing a territory that stretches from Britain to Syria. It's a nightmare.
Logistically, yeah, I can see that.
And that's why Diocletian split the empire in 285. He thought it would be easier to manage.
East and west.
Yep. It kind of worked, but it also had some unintended consequences. The East was just richer, more urbanized, better trade networks. The West, comparatively, was in a much weaker position economically.
And that leads to the whole financial mess the transcript talks about.
Oh, yeah. The West was hemorrhaging money, constant wars, both with the barbarians and amongst themselves.
Where civil wars are never good for the bank account.
Nope. And maintaining a massive army, that's not cheap either. Plus, they were still relying heavily on slave labor, which was problematic on multiple levels.
Not to mention morally wrong.
Of course, but it was also economically unsustainable. Once the empire stopped expanding, the supply of new slaves dried up. That meant agriculture and basically everything else took a huge hit.
Makes sense. Less slaves, less production, less money.
Exactly. And without money, you can't pay for a good army. They had to start relying more and more on those federatis and other mercenaries.
Who might not have been the most loyal bunch.
Let's just say their priorities were elsewhere. And that just added to the instability. Then you've got the whole leadership problem. The later emperors, they were out of touch. They moved the capital first to Milan, then Ravenna. They weren't even in Rome.
Talk about a disconnect.
And you get some truly terrible emperors. Kids, basically. Romulus, the last one, he was only 16.
No wonder things fell apart.
Right. Plus, the aristocracy, the wealthy elites, they were getting more and more powerful. Low taxes, lots of influence over weak emperors. They were basically looting the empire for their own gain.
Corruption at the top. Classic.
It really eroded trust in the government, both among the Roman people and those barbarian soldiers they were relying on.
So it's like internal rot meeting external pressure.
Exactly. And then you've got another interesting factor the transcript brings up. Christianity.
Religion always adds another layer of complexity.
Right. It became legal in 313 AD, and then the official religion in 380. That had a huge impact on the empire.
It was a total shift, right?
Totally. Christianity is monotheistic, one god. The Romans, they used to just absorb the local gods of whoever they conquered. It was a way to control them, Romanize them. But with Christianity, that all changes.
And the emperors, they used to be seen as gods themselves, right?
Exactly. Divine right to rule. But with Christianity, that idea kind of falls apart. So did Christianity itself weaken the empire, or was it the change it brought about, that kind of cultural shift that messed with their social cohesion, their ability to rule? It's a fascinating question.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, for sure. But here's the key thing. Even though the Western Roman Empire officially went kaput in 476, Rome didn't just vanish. Its influence lived on.
Like with the Byzantines, right?
Yeah, the Eastern Roman Empire. They kept going strong for another 1,000 years. They kept Roman law, culture, traditions alive. And even in the West, you see those Roman ideas popping up again.
Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Empire.
Exactly. It shows you how powerful that Roman ideal was. And don't forget the cultural impact. So many European languages come from Latin.
French, Spanish, Italian.
The list goes on. And Latin Christianity, the Pope, huge influence on the medieval world. And all those Roman roads, aqueducts, all that infrastructure, it laid the foundation for Europe, even cities like London.
London was a Roman city
That's
first.
Londinium. So yeah, 476 is a big deal, but it's not the end of the story. Rome's impact is still felt today.
Okay, so, big picture. The fall of the Western Roman Empire wasn't one thing. It was a slow burn, a whole bunch of problems colliding.
Exactly. You've got the barbarian migrations pushing from the outside, but you've also got all this internal weakness. They were too big for their own good, their economy was a mess, their leaders were terrible, and then there's the whole religious shift with Christianity.
A recipe for disaster. And one thing that really stands out to me, listening to all this, is how badly they mishandled the Goths.
Oh, yeah. That was a huge turning point.
It's like they couldn't figure out how to manage migration and integrate newcomers,
Mhm.
and it cost them everything. Even the most powerful empires can screw up. It's a cautionary tale.
And here's something for you listeners to think about. All those challenges Rome faced, becoming too big, economic inequality, bad leadership, constant pressure from outside forces, don't they sound familiar?
Kind of like today's world, in a way.
Right. So what can we learn from Rome's mistakes? What can we do differently? It's something worth pondering, right? Rome might be gone, but its story still has a lot to teach us.